Is it the alcohol you're addicted to, or is it the carbs in the alcohol? Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name's Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. The carnivore diet is designed for health reasons, but people really like alcohol and they want to not cut that out of their diet. It's something they want to have occasionally. And if someone wants that, I think go for it if you can manage it. If you can manage it. In my experience, from people I've spoken with, the one thing that keeps them from doing a carnivore diet is quitting alcohol. So as I've mentioned in a few other videos lately, I've taken the ad out in the middle of my video and I've made my videos shorter. So in exchange, I'm hoping that you can like, comment, or subscribe in my videos. I really appreciate that. So anyway, when it comes to alcohol on a carnivore diet, how do you manage that? I mean, from a really strict carnivore point of view, that's something that's completely off a carnivore diet. One, it's vegetable based. Two, it's alcohol. So there's nothing really healthy about it. And that's the big stressor here. I've talked to a lot of people through the years about carnivore because I had a very social job as a massage therapist and you had a lot of one-on-one time and you talk about different things. And when they found out I was eating carnivore and they understood no vegetables, okay, no fruit, okay, and now there's no alcohol, they're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not giving that up because I like my glass of wine at the end of the day, or I like my beer on the weekends, whatever it is. And people have a hard time giving that up because that's the one thing they really look forward to at the end of the day is that really wonderful glass of alcohol. Some people it's pasta, some people it's pizza, some people it's potatoes of any kind, and there's so many ways to prepare it. But alcohol seems to be the biggest issue for people when they want to switch to a carnivore diet. And if you're having trouble giving something up, there might be something a little bigger at play, and that's a bit of a, not a wake-up call, it might be for some people, but it's something that you have to ask yourself, is it really a safe place to be? So as far as alcohols go, keep in mind, if you're gonna have alcohol in your diet, you wanna try and keep it zero carb or as close to zero carb as you can get. So I think it's dry wines have a low sugar content. You can look on the bottle typically for the sugar content on wine, and you wanna try and get something without much sugar. So if you're gonna have wine, that's something you might have. If that's too much of a temptation for you and you think, that's not really a good idea that I should even go down that road, I highly recommend you don't. But if you can manage this sort of thing, this isn't too much of an issue for you. This is just a way to fine tune it so that you can still have some alcohol on occasion. Some people like it at the end of their day. Some people like it at special occasions. So with wine, we have that covered. There's a whole section there. Something low in carbs, like most beers, isn't a good way to go. I'm sure there's different levels of carbohydrates in beers to choose a lesser evil, but it's the equivalent of whole wheat bread versus white bread. It's still bread. So at that point, we're looking at liquors. And when it comes to liquors, most liquors don't have much carbs in them. Now there's some liquors that have zero carbs in them. That's vodka and gin. So you can have most vodkas and gins, unless there's additives in there, and they're going to be zero carb. But here's the thing, any kind of alcohol pops you out of ketosis. Now, some people don't mind going in and out of ketosis. They think it's healthy. And if they're going to ingest something that pops them out of ketosis, so they might think to themselves, well, I'm going to use alcohol. It'll pop me out of ketosis, but it's better than having some carbs because carbs will often pop you out of ketosis, but so will a big lean meal. If you have a lot of chicken, for example, that might pop you out of ketosis. But some people get into ketosis so extreme that they're almost bulletproof. They're like a speeding train with like bugs deflecting off the front of it. It just doesn't matter anymore, right? So they can just stay in ketosis unless they do it consistently where they're consistently cheating or doing something off a ketogenic way of eating. They're gonna keep having issues getting out of ketosis if they're doing it too often back to back. And then they're gonna sit there and wonder, like, why am I not getting into ketosis? That's often the reason. You have to sort of get to the point where you're like a speeding train. You have a lot of momentum behind you that you can start doing this every now and then, and it's just not going to affect you too much. Now, the alcohol is always going to affect you if they're still dealing with insulin resistance and their metabolism hasn't fully healed yet. If you're in a great bulletproof way where you're in really good shape and all your blood work comes back good all the time and your doctors are satisfied with all your numbers, then yeah, give it a shot. Maybe you might have to get to the point where you cut out alcohol until you get to the point where you're healthy. And then once you're there, maybe you can think about reintroducing it slowly. I did that with sugar myself and it didn't work out well for me. So that might not work out for you down the road, but it still might be something maybe you can manage. It's up to you, but you have to understand and be honest with yourself with what you can handle. You might have to just cut it out for months or years at a time till you get healthy, or maybe you might just have to abstain from it altogether. And if that's something that kind of makes you panic a little bit inside, that's sort of an indication that maybe you need to do that. Now, I've personally never struggled with alcohol. I grew up always having alcohol at my fingertips. There was a lot of alcohol flowing in that house I grew up in. And my parents always believed that if they didn't make it a novelty for us, it wouldn't be too much of an issue. And there's lots of times, even as an infant, they would give us a little sip of alcohol, because when you're an infant, you just want to have what mommy and daddy are having, right? My mom was never really a drinker. My dad drank quite a bit of beer, and all our company drank quite a bit of beer. It's something that I was allowed to have, not as much as I wanted, but whenever I wanted. My dad, depending on my age, would let us have a certain amount. By the time I was maybe 11 or 12, I could have like a little bit at the bottom of a glass. By the time I was 13 or 14, I was allowed to have maybe half a beer. If my dad was cooking steak and he put some beer on it while he was barbecuing and there was half a can of beer left, I could ask my dad, hey, can I have the rest of the beer? And he'd go, yep. His one rule was, if you want it, just ask for it. I'm never going to say no. Just ask for it. Simple as that. Until you're 19, because in Canada, 19 is the legal age of drinking. So by the time I was a teenager and I started to see people getting horribly drunk at parties, it was something that it didn't really impress me at all. There was no novelty factor for me because it wasn't a forbidden fruit as it is for most children, right? At a young age, you learn drinking means getting drunk. And that is supposed to go away as you get older. As you get older, you start to realize, wait a minute, I shouldn't be doing this. Like everyone else around me eventually stopped doing that, and I'm still getting drunk every time I drink. I didn't really start drinking till my mid-30s. And the interesting thing about that was I finally found some alcohol that I enjoyed. A friend got me a beer from out of the country and he said, I think you'll really like this. Knowing I was never a big drinker, I might have had maybe 2 beers a year. And I really liked it. And then I started going for craft and imported beers. And it was something I did for probably about 5 to 6 years. I really enjoyed having these beers, but I always drank for the flavor of it. I've only been drunk twice in my life. Once I was 18, the other time I was 21 maybe. And aside from that, it was just never something that I really cared to do. I never had hangovers. The couple times I did get drunk, it was never really an issue. For the most part, I just drank to have a beer or two. And as soon as I'd start feeling a buzz, I'd be like, no, I don't want any more, because I typically don't like that feeling. And also being a big guy, I typically had a high alcohol tolerance. It makes it really expensive to try and get drunk. So when I was a bouncer years ago, I noticed the older I got, that crowd typically stayed the same age at the bars, right? They're usually between the age of 19 and 21, 22, 23. And every now and then you'd see these 25-year-olds that would come into the bar and they'd sort of stick out whenever they were horribly drunk. And sometimes you would see guys in their late 20s and you think, all these other people have stopped going to the bars consistently every weekend. And when they do go, they're not even getting drunk all the time, but eventually they kind of phase out of that. And then there's some people that keep it up and they hadn't stopped like everyone else did. And then by the time they're in their late 20s doing this, and it's just something to watch. Drinking doesn't necessarily mean get drunk. It means you can have a glass or two and try and moderate it. If you're having trouble moderating alcohol because it's just beyond you and you can't stop and you give into every craving for it and you just can't stop when you started, there's places you can go to get help. Not for me, but this is the interesting thing. I knew someone when they quit carbohydrates after 5 months, they turned around and said, I thought all this time I had an alcohol addiction. It turned out since I went zero carb, the last 2 months, I haven't craved alcohol at all. It turned out that person was addicted to the sugars and the carbohydrates in the alcohol, not the alcohol. And it blew that person's mind and it blew my mind because I had no idea they were dealing with alcoholism at all. So it's a perspective I want you to pay attention to when it comes to alcohol. And maybe if it's an issue, look into getting help for it because it's never too late. You want to always be there for your family, right? You want to be there for your siblings, your parents. No one wants to see their child go through this, and you don't want to be that example to your child. This video is not meant to preach to anyone, but it's to help bring some awareness about the topic and especially how it relates to a zero-carb carnivore diet. Sometimes you can knock that out of your diet and not have those cravings anymore. I've seen it firsthand. So anyway, if you like this video, please comment and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up. Take care.